Hi folks, you're with Tacitus today at your pushback channel, and thank you for joining this radio live stream. In this essay, I'd like to talk about something I've heard a number of commentators in the United States mentioning, which is, are elections being decided now with new rules and a new ground game, given the substantial increase in mail-in ballots and what you could call non-attendance voting. Now, if we look at some recent elections, where particularly in areas where the races would have been tight run, they had an unusually large component of mail-in ballots, and these votes, or these mail-in ballots, or areas where there were large amounts of mail-in ballots, were the outcomes, the election outcomes were quite controversial. Now, there are some that say the mail-in ballots leave the door open for voting inconsistencies. Others claim that's not so. The mainstream media dismisses out of hand any suggestion or implication that mail-in ballots had any effect on anything at all. Now, I guess there's some commentators are saying, well, look, that's the new Democrats' ground game, and it's clearly working. So, what if the Republicans do the same thing? And they have what's generically referred to as a ballot harvesting set of procedures and tactics, or call it what you will. And if they do that, then they too will or they'll win more elections, particularly in areas that might be tightly contested. So now I don't know whether that's the case or not. It's hard to ascertain. What makes it difficult in the United States is each state, or many states rather, have many different laws regarding ballot collection and delivery. For example, in one state you can only deliver the ballots of your immediate family, so the husband, wife, children, that sort of thing. In others, you can do it in a more extended family, such as a cousin or something like that. In others, again, you can't do a mail-in ballot unless you can prove that you're handicapped, too handicapped, like you're in a wheelchair or something, to make it to the voting booths. And yet other laws and subsets of laws that exist. So it's quite a hodgepodge, and it'd be a tough gig to sort of wade through every single one of those. Every single one of those states or districts, in some case, the state has a law, but the district may have a sub-law or a bylaw that applies to voting. So so it's a hard one to work out. Nonetheless, let's assume that it is the case that the Republicans have a much better vote collecting or harvesting, as it's generally called, capacity. Then they'll win more votes. Let's assume that's so for the moment. Now, one of the things that the Democrats certainly have been good at, and something that no one else really seemed to realise, particularly during COVID, but even since then, is this idea that ballots can be gathered in large numbers by various party operatives and then delivered in bulk, in some cases into the tens of thousands, and that those votes maybe not scrutinised to the degree that some may say it's due. Then could Republicans do the same thing? If that's the new game in town, then why doesn't everybody do it? I don't agree with that. I think the idea of, well, if you reckon the other guys are being a little bit creative, then why aren't we creative as well? Hey, that's the new game. Then I'm not sure that achieves the free and fair and elections of integrity type program that we should all be working towards rather than working away from. Now, there's some claims that in parts of California that typically should have gone Democrat, some of the Republicans there have started a vote harvesting, legal as I understand it, but a vote harvesting program that served them quite well, and they've won a couple of districts. But votes should be uncertain outcomes. And if you look at sort of Joe Biden before the midterm congressional elections, he was able to say it's going to be very close, and it was. It's going to be a long time for another result, and it was. It's not going to be the result you expect, and it was. Accept the outcome. Republicans, you're not going to do that well. Accept the outcome, and because that's kind of how it is. And Biden sort of predicted almost exactly how the election would go. Down to, his handlers. It wasn't him. His handlers gave him that speech. He predicted exactly how it was going to go, and at the time, and the results, and so on. I don't know how somebody can do that many that much in advance before the first vote was even cast. Wish I knew how he did that. The guy should be soothsayer. He should be filling out his lot of coupons. So when we're looking at vote collection, the idea that somebody can go out to, say, a university as a case in point, and say, okay, well, here's a ballot form, everybody. Everybody who wants to vote Democrat can do so, and I'll take your ballots to the vote counting centre, and so you voted. Now they may get 10,000 university students casting a Democrat ballot there. Students that wouldn't actually turn up for voting day. Some might, but many wouldn't. Should voting be an indication of someone's commitment to the democratic process, or should it be, a rebel rouser goes to a university and says, "Hey, do you all hate Donald Trump? Yeah, fascist Nazi. Yeah, Hitler. Yeah. Okay, guys, here's some ballots. Go fill them out. I'll take them into the electoral centre for you, or the vote counting centre." That's hardly the democratic process at work. So is voting in person a commitment to, your commitment as a citizen, that is, your commitment to the democracy and to the, the election process, or is it an impediment? For example, you may have seen better to do on that day. Maybe you're working all day. Maybe you've got an important job. Maybe you're looking after. Maybe you're visiting your mum and she's about to die or something. There are people who've got commitments. Now, here's the rub, though. Before the big mail-in voting thing around 2020 and that sort of stuff, mail-in voting was sort of 1%. Maybe in extreme weather conditions you get a bit more. But you're looking at 1%, 2%. But it came to be 20% plus. And in those areas where the mail-in voting was the greatest, that's where the outcome was the most surprising. And where the mail-in votes were almost directly contradicting the in-person voting. So I don't know if there's a way of doing this. Should there be mass collection of ballots under any circumstances? If someone is able-bodied and capable, they're not in a wheelchair or completely infirm, then they should have to vote. They can appear in person beforehand, like in the days preceding when they do have a free day or available time. They could do that, but not have a mail-in vote. Now, if there is to be mail-in votes, then the scrutineering must be amped up considerably so that there's a proper chain of custody throughout, so that there's no confusion about when the ballot was brought in, when it was counted, all this sort of stuff. There has to be intense scrutiny. Now, I've been a scrutineer at an election, at a federal election, so I've got some understanding and knowledge of how these things work. And scrutineering is vitally important when ballots are being looked at that have not been cast in person. If you cast a ballot in person, you've got to produce ID, photo ID. It's much harder to scam the system. But in a mail-in ballot, there's much more latitude to do that. That doesn't mean that any of them are a scam, but it means that the scrutineering must be increased in proportion to the level of possible risk that's involved in compromising election integrity. So I think there's a lot of work to do in not just the United States, but elsewhere, but particularly the United States. A lot of work to do in all of us committing to election integrity and integrity to the highest degree, absolutely to the nth degree. And so this idea that if those guys are cheating, we should cheat too, or if those guys are being creative, we should be creative to margins as well. I don't think that's the way to go. I understand the thinking behind it. What's the point of playing fair if you're going to lose every time? Well, I do get that, but I think election integrity must be front and center of any conversation we have about these sorts of things, and that must be addressed first and foremost. You've been tasked to start your pushback channel, and thank you for listening.